Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has rejected the prospect of wartime elections, saying it would be highly dangerous. The remarks come in response to a call from the former Defense Minister Mykhailo Fedorov to organize a vote after he was fired by Zelensky last month. Fedorov enjoys significant support among younger Ukrainians, thousands of whom have been calling for his reinstatement. France 24's Eliza Herbert has more.
On Ukraine's National Flag Day and the eve of its Independence Day, Volodymyr Zelensky chose to send a strong political message. According to the Ukrainian president, holding elections right now would be an enormous risk.
Elections right now are a tsunami for the country that will split Ukraine. If we want to destroy the country, then we can move in the direction of elections during these times of war.
His statement, made a day earlier during a private briefing with journalists, comes after his former Defence Minister Mykhailo Fedorov called for a national vote. Zelensky's presidential term expired in May 2024, but no elections can be held in Ukraine under martial law, which has been in force since Russia's invasion in February 2022. Since Fedorov was dismissed from his role last month, he has sought to seize upon the unprecedented situation. Earlier this week, the popular former minister released a video that resembled a campaign clip. In it, he denounced corruption and called, without giving further details, for restoring the democratic process through elections, despite the complications of holding such an event during wartime. His remarks sparked controversy and unease among many, even his own supporters, in a country that has been fighting a deadly war on a daily basis for more than 4 years. Logistically, organising an election would likely be fraught with obstacles, such as the issue of voting rights for the millions of refugees abroad, as well as for military personnel deployed on the battlefield and Ukrainians living in territories occupied by Moscow.
Well, let's get a little more on that. We have France 24's Matthew-Mary Caruchet joining us. Matthew-Mary, so how hard would it be to hold elections in Ukraine right now?
Well, it would be extremely hard. There are a lot of hurdles to overcome, most notably the population. People have dispersed throughout Ukraine and abroad since the war began when Russia invaded in 2022. Before the war, there were about 41 to 43.5 million people living in Ukraine. But since then, almost 6 million of them are living abroad as refugees. 3.7 million are displaced internally. That's about 20% of the pre-war population, and doesn't even include the 3.5 million people living in the Russian-occupied areas. So tracking down these people, making sure they're able to vote, setting up polling places in countries across Europe and in Russian-occupied territories. These are extremely difficult tasks for any government to go through, especially one that's currently at war. And the war fighting itself is an incredibly high hurdle for anyone to jump over. Fighting is raging along more than 1,200 kilometers in the east, the south, and the north. Electricity supplies are consistently disrupted due to attacks on the energy infrastructure, and hundreds of Russian drones are raining down regularly, pounding cities and towns far from the border. Now, even though Zelensky has said today that this would divide the country, he has previously said that he is in support of elections during the war if they can be done safely. But that would involve military protection from allies, and allies have been loath to send in any troops into Ukraine's territory. And even if they did, it's not certain that they could protect from Russian bombing. And would Russia stop bombing just so Ukraine could hold elections? And speaking of Russia, technology is another main issue. Russia is extremely good at technological hacking and disinformation campaigns. Would this have to be a completely paper ballot election just so that Russia couldn't interfere? And despite his appeal for elections, former Defense Minister Mykhailo Fedorov has not laid out answers to any of these questions. He's not said how he thinks the elections should come through or any solutions to any of these problems. And it's not even sure that Ukrainians want these elections right now. Polling has consistently shown that the majority of Ukrainians would rather wait until the war is over.
Right, so you're saying that aside from the obvious dangers of the fighting, there would be plenty of logistical challenges as well. Now, if we were to entertain the idea of new elections in Ukraine, would Zelensky stand a chance?
Well, it's not certain. There are polls consistently conducted about hypothetical elections. They have been going on for years. And for the year after the Russian invasion of Ukraine, Zelensky was virtually untouchable. For the first year, 65 to 81% of voters all said that they would vote for him, hands down. But since then, his polls have returned to what they were before the war. We're going to put up numbers from two most recent reputable polls, and they're both after the sacking of Fedorov. Now, they both show Zelensky is still in the lead, but it's only about 18% in one poll and 22% in another. Behind him is Valery Zaluzhny, and behind him is Fedorov. Now, Fedorov has only been polled in the most recent polls since he was sacked, so he's kind of a newcomer. And there are still about a dozen other polled candidates in these polls that have much, much lower numbers. And just to touch on who Zaluzhny is for a second, he's a Ukrainian four-star general and diplomat who's currently the ambassador to the UK. He disagreed with Zelensky on many, many issues until he was reassigned in 2024. And even though he's seen as the main challenger, he has never announced his candidacy, put forward a political platform, or presented any vision for Ukraine after the war. So Fedorov, in this hypothetical, in third place, could become a formidable challenger. His complaints about corruption undermining the war effort and the opaque decision-making process in the Zelensky administration are touching a chord. But he's by no means a shoe-in, and Zelensky is still the favorite.
Okay, Matthew-Mary, thank you very much for that.